Jake Mitchell wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel. The metal walls around him were hot to the touch, and strange alien symbols glowed red along the pipes above his head. He could hear the sound of braking machinery echoing through the tunnel. Something was very wrong with the Kethfer research station. The station had been his home for 6 months now. Jake was part of a mixed team of humans and aliens working together on new technology. The Velthari aliens who owned the station were tall, gray-skinned beings with large eyes and long fingers. They were smart and built amazing things, but Jake had noticed their machines broke down a lot. Today was different, though. Today, everything was breaking at once. Jake reached the end of the tunnel and dropped down into a room filled with blinking lights and humming machines. This was the life support center, and most of the lights were flashing red. The air felt thin, and he could taste metal on his tongue. It's not good signs. His radio crackled to life. "All personnel to the docking bay immediately," came the voice of Commander Zethara, the Velthari in charge of the station. "Emergency evacuation protocol is in effect. This is not a drill." Jake looked around the room. If the life support failed completely, everyone on the station would die. He knew the other engineers were probably already running to the escape shuttles, but someone needed to try to fix this mess. At least buy them more time. He opened his toolkit and got to work. The Velthari systems were beautiful but complicated. Everything was connected to everything else through living tissue that looked like veins and nerves. When one part failed, it made other parts fail too. Jake had always thought this was a bad design, but he had kept his opinions to himself. Now, he wished he had spoken up. Jake found the main problem quickly. A bioneural hub that controlled the air recycling had burned out. The living tissue around it was turning black and dying. The Velthari had backup systems, but they were failing to because they all depended on the same hub. He pulled out his emergency bypass kit. It was crude human technology compared to the elegant alien systems, but it was reliable. Jake started connecting thick cables around the dead hub, creating a new path for the electrical signals. It was like performing surgery on a patient while the building was on fire. The radio crackled again. Final boarding call. All shuttles depart in 5 minutes. Anyone not at the docking bay will be left behind. Jake's hands moved faster. He had to get the air working again, or the people still trying to evacuate would not make it to the shuttles alive. Sweat dripped into his eyes as he made the last connection, the room filled with the sound of fans starting up. Green lights began, replacing the red ones. Fresh air flowed through the vents. Jake had done it. He grabbed his tools and ran toward the docking bay. The station's corridors were empty now except for emergency lighting. His boots echoed on the metal floors as he sprinted through sections he knew by heart. Past the research labs where he had worked with alien scientists. Past the dining hall where humans and Velthari had shared meals and stories about their different worlds. Jake reached the docking bay. Just as the last shuttle was closing its doors, he could see his teammate, Lisa Park, through the window. She was looking around frantically, probably searching for him. He ran toward the shuttle, waving his arms and shouting. The shuttle's engines were already starting. The Velthari pilot either could not see him or chose not to wait. Jake watched helplessly as the craft lifted off the deck and flew out through the station's launch doors. The massive doors began to close behind it. He was alone. Jake stood in the empty docking bay, breathing hard through the thick windows. He could see the shuttles flying away toward the human colony ship that had brought them here. Soon they would be gone, and he would be the only living thing left on a dying station. The lights around him flickered. In the distance, he could hear the sound of more systems failing. Without constant repairs, the station would fall apart completely within days, maybe hours. Most people would have panicked. Most people would have sat down and waited to die. But Jake Mitchell was an engineer, and engineers solve problems, even impossible ones. He walked back into the station and looked around with new eyes. Yes, the place was falling apart. Yes, he was probably going to die here. But he had tools. He had knowledge. And he had the most complex engineering puzzle he had ever seen. The Velthari had given up on their station. They thought it was beyond saving. But they had never seen what a human engineer could do when his back was against the wall. Jake picked up his toolkit and headed back to the life support center. If he was going to die on this station, he was going to go down fighting. And maybe, just maybe, he could keep himself alive long enough to prove that they're impossible. Problem just needed a different kind of solution. The kind of solution that only a human would be crazy enough to try. Jake had been alone on the station for 3 days now. His emergency food was already running low, and he had not slept more than 2 hours at a time. Every few hours, another system would fail, and he would have to run to fix it before something important stopped working, but he was learning. The Veltheri built their technology in a way that was completely different from human machines. Instead of simple metal and wires, they used living tissue that could think and adapt. Their computers were grown, not built. Their power systems used crystals that hummed with energy. Everything was connected like a giant brain. It was beautiful. It was also terrible for repairs. Jake sat in the main computer room surrounded by glowing tanks filled with floating bioneural networks. Each tank contained what looked like a jellyfish made of light. These creatures controlled different parts of the station. One managed the lights. Another handled waste recycling. The third one controlled the artificial gravity. The problem was that they all talked to each other constantly. When one got sick or died, it would panic the others. Then they would start making mistakes, which would panic even more of them. It was like a chain reaction of fear spreading through the entire station. Jake pulled up the station blueprints. On his portable computer, he had been studying them for days, trying to understand how everything fit together. The more he learned, the more frustrated he became. The Veltheri were smart, much smarter than humans in many ways. But they had made their systems too complicated. Everything depended on everything else. There were no simple backups, no emergency switches, no way to isolate a problem and fix it without it's affecting 50 other things. It was like building a house where every room shared the same foundation. If one room had a problem, the whole house would shake. Jake stood up and walked to the power distribution center. Here, crystalline matrices glowed with soft blue light, channeling energy throughout the station. The crystals were arranged in perfect geometric patterns that looked like art more than engineering. But Jake could see the flaws in their beauty. When he had been working with the mix team, Jake had suggested adding simple backup power lines. Commander Zethera had looked at him like he was crazy. "Why would we need ugly metal cables when our crystal network is perfectly efficient?" she had asked. Now Jake knew why. One of the crystals had developed a crack, and it was causing power fluctuations in 17 different systems. The beautiful network had no way to route around the damaged crystal. Everything just had to suffer until the crystal could be replaced. But Jake did not have replacement crystals. He had metal cables and human determination. He opened his tool kit and pulled out a roll of thick copper wire. It was crude compared to the elegant crystal systems, but it would carry electricity from point A to point B without failing. Sometimes crude was exactly what you needed. Jake began stringing the cable around the cracked crystal, creating a path for electricity to flow even if the crystal stopped working completely. The Veltheri would probably think it looked awful, but Jake did not care about pretty, cared about working as he connected the last wire. The power fluctuations stopped. The lights became steady. The humming of machines became smooth and regular. His ugly human solution had made the beautiful alien system work better. Jake smiled for the first time in days. He was starting to understand something important. Over the next week, Jake worked his way through the station section by section. Every time he found a system that was too delicate or too complicated, he added human-style backups. Mechanical switches alongside bioneural controls. Metal pipes next to living tissue conduits. Simple alarms that would work even if the smart systems got confused. The station began to change under his hands. It was no longer purely Veltheri technology. It was becoming something new. Something that combined alien intelligence with human stubbornness. Jake was in the dining hall, working on the food processing system, when he made his biggest discovery yet. The system had been failing because its bioneural controller was trying to manage too many tasks at once. It was monitoring temperature, nutrition, taste, presentation, and waste disposal all at the same time. When one task became difficult, the whole system would freeze up. Jake looked at the problem and saw a simple solution. He divided the tasks between multiple controllers, with each one handling just one or two jobs. Then he connected them with simple communication links that could not get confused or overwhelmed. It was like having 5 people do a job instead of one person trying to do 5 jobs at once. The food processor started working better than it ever had. Not only did it produce food faster, but the food actually tasted better because each controller could focus on doing its one job perfectly. Jake stepped back and looked at what he had accomplished. The station was not just surviving anymore. Parts of it were actually working better than they had when it was new. His crude human additions were making the sophisticated alien systems more reliable and more efficient. He was not just fixing the station, he was improving it. That night, Jake allowed himself for hours of sleep. For the first time since being stranded, he felt hope. The Velthari had abandoned this place because they thought it was broken beyond repair. But maybe they had been wrong. Maybe the station did not need to be fixed. Maybe it needed to be changed. Maybe it needed a human touch. Jake dreamed of hybrid machines that combined the best of both worlds. Alien intelligence guided by human reliability. Beautiful systems protected by ugly backups. Technology that was both elegant and unbreakable. When he woke up, he got back to work. He had a station to rebuild, and he was just getting started. 2 weeks had passed since Jake had been left alone on the station. He was no longer just surviving. He was building something new. Every morning, Jake would wake up and check his list of projects. The list had grown from 3 emergency repairs to over 40 improvement plans. Each day brought new ideas as he discovered more ways to make the station work better. Today, he was working in the research labs. The Velthari had built amazing equipment here, but most of it had stopped working. When the station's main systems failed, Jake walked between tables covered with strange machines that looked more like art than tools. Each device was beautiful, but fragile. Jake picked up a molecular scanner that had been one of his favorite tools. It could analyze any material down to its smallest parts, but it only worked when everything else on the station was running perfectly. When there were power fluctuations or temperature changes, the scanner would shut down to protect itself. "That's your problem right there," Jake said to the empty room. He had started talking to himself more often lately. "You're too careful. Sometimes you have to keep working even when things aren't perfect." He opened up the scanner and studied its insides. The Velthari had built it with sensors that monitored everything: temperature, vibration, power quality, air purity, even the mood of nearby bioneural networks. If any of these sensors detected a problem, the whole machine would stop working. Jake began disconnecting sensors one by one, testing the machine after each change. He found that most of the sensors were not necessary. The scanner worked just fine with only basic power and temperature monitoring. All the other sensors just gave it excuses to quit. But Jake did not stop there. He added his own improvements: a backup power cell in case the main power failed, a cooling fan to handle temperature spikes, a simple reset switch that would restart the machine if it got confused. When he was done, the scanner was not as pretty as before. It had human components sticking out in odd places, but it was much more reliable. Jake tested it for hours, and it kept working no matter what problems he threw at it. "Ugly but unbreakable," Jake said with satisfaction. "I like it." He moved on to the next lab and found a protein synthesizer that had not worked in months. This machine could create any kind of food from basic chemicals, but its bioneural brain had developed what Jake called performance anxiety. It was so worried about making mistakes that it had stopped trying altogether. Jake studied the machine's programming. The Velthari had given it thousands of rules about nutrition, taste, texture, appearance, and presentation. The poor bioneural brain was trying to follow all these rules at once, and had gotten overwhelmed. Jake simplified everything. He removed most of the complicated rules and replaced them with basic guidelines. Make food that is safe to eat. Make food that has the right nutrients. Everything else was optional. He also gave the machine the ability to learn from mistakes. Instead of being afraid of them, if something went wrong, the machine would try a different approach instead of shutting down. The protein synthesizer began working again within hours. The food it made was not as fancy as before, but it was nutritious and tasted good. More importantly, it kept working even when other systems had problems. Jake spent the next few days working through every piece of equipment in the research section. He simplified controls that were too complicated. He added backups to systems that had none. He taught bioneural networks to be less afraid of imperfection. The changes he made followed a pattern. Human machines were built to keep working even when things went wrong. Alien machines were built to work perfectly when everything was right. Jake was combining both approaches to create machines that worked well all the time in the third week. Jake started working on the station's bigger systems. The artificial gravity generator was his biggest challenge yet. It used a complex network of graviton manipulators connected through bioneural pathways. When it worked, it was smooth and perfect. When it did not work, people floated around like balloons. The system had been failing randomly for months before Jake arrived. The Velthari engineers had tried many times to fix it, but the failures kept happening. Jake spent 3 days studying the system before he understood the real problem. The gravity generator was trying to be too smart. It monitored the position and movement of every person on the station, adjusting the gravity field to make everyone as comfortable as possible. But with so many variables to track, the system would sometimes get confused and shut down. Jake's solution was typically human. He divided the station into zones and gave each zone its own simple gravity field. No complex tracking. No constant adjustments. Just steady, reliable gravity that worked the same way all the time. He kept the smart system as a backup for special situations. But the simple system handled day-to-day operations. People could count on the gravity being there when they needed it. By the end of the month, Jake had transformed the station. Emergency repairs had become systematic improvements. Random failures had become predictable maintenance. The station was not just working again. It was working better than it ever had. Jake stood in the central control room looking at displays that showed every system on the station. All the lights were green. The numbers looked good. For the first time since the evacuation, every single system was functioning properly. But Jake was not done yet. He had bigger plans. He had been studying the station's original design specifications. The Velthari had built it to support 200 people. But Jake thought it could support twice that many with the right modifications. His hybrid systems were more efficient than the original designs. They used less power, produced less waste, and required less maintenance. Jake began planning phase 2 of his reconstruction. It would not just improve what was already there. He would add completely new capabilities. The station that the Velthari had abandoned was becoming something that had never existed before, a perfect fusion of alien elegance and human determination. Technology that was both beautiful and unbreakable. Jake smiled as he made notes in his project journal. Tomorrow he would start building something that neither humans nor Velthari had ever imagined possible, something better than both. Jake was working on his latest project when the alarms started ringing. After 6 weeks alone on the station, he had gotten used to silence. The sudden noise made him jump and drop his tools. He ran to the control room and checked the sensors. A Velthari ship was approaching fast. Jake's heart started beating faster. He had dreamed about being rescued, but he had also grown attached to his work. The station was his now, and he was not sure he wanted to give it up. The ship docked with a loud clang that echoed through the empty corridors. Jake heard footsteps and voices speaking in the musical Velthari language. He recognized one of the voices. It was Commander Zathera, the alien who had ordered the evacuation. Jake walked to the docking bay to meet them. He was wearing clothes he had sewn together from spare materials, and his hair had grown long and messy. He probably looked like a wild man, but he felt proud of what he had accomplished. The docking bay doors opened, and 5 Velthari stepped through. Commander Zathera was in front, her large eyes scanning the area. Behind her were 4 other aliens wearing the uniforms of engineers and scientists. They all looked surprised to see Jake alive. Engineer Mitchell, Commander Zethra said, her voice showing shock. You are supposed to be dead. Sorry to disappoint you, Jake replied with a smile. But I've been busy. The commander looked around the docking bay. The lights were bright and steady. The air smelled fresh and clean. Gravity felt normal. Everything looked exactly as it should, except better. How is this possible? She asked. The station was failing when we evacuated. Bioneural networks were dying. The crystal matrices were cracked. Everything was breaking down. I fixed it, Jake said simply. One of the engineers, tall Velthari with silver markings on his skin, stepped forward. Impossible. Our best team spent months trying to repair those systems. The damage was too extensive. Jake shrugged. I guess I had a different approach. He led the group through the station, showing them what he had accomplished. Followed in stunned silence. Every system they checked was not only working better than it had when the station was new in the Life Support Center. Commander Zethra stared at Jake's hybrid systems. Ugly human cables ran alongside beautiful alien bioneural networks. Mechanical switches sat next to living tissue controls. Metal fans worked beside crystalline air purifiers. This is wrong, the silver-marked engineer said. You have contaminated our elegant systems with your crude technology. My crude technology is keeping your elegant systems alive, Jake replied calmly. Watch this. He reached over and deliberately disconnected one of the bioneural networks. In the old system, this would have caused a cascade failure that would shut down life support for the entire section. Instead, his mechanical backups automatically took over. The air kept flowing. Lights stayed on. The temperature remained stable. Your bioneural network can rest and heal itself while my mechanical system does the work, Jake explained as he reconnected the living tissue. When the bioneural network is ready, it can take control again. They work together instead of depending on each other. The Velthari engineers exchanged looks. They'd never seen anything like this. Their technology, everything was connected and interdependent. Jake had created something new. Systems that were both connected and independent. Commander, Zethra asked the question that was on everyone's mind. What is the station's current operational status? Jake pulled out a portable display and showed her the numbers. All systems are running at 147% of original efficiency. Power consumption is down 23%. Waste production is down 31%. The station can now support 340 people instead of the original 200. The Velthari stared at the numbers in disbelief. It was impossible. Their most advanced engineering teams had never achieved efficiency ratings above 110%. How could one human, working alone with primitive tools, have done better? Show me everything, Commander, Zethra demanded. For the next 3 hours, Jake took them through every section of the station. He showed them how he had simplified overcomplicated systems, how he had added reliability to delicate components, how he had created redundancy without waste in the research labs. The Velthari scientists tested equipment that had been broken for months. Everything worked perfectly. The molecular scanner that had been temperamental now ran for hours without problems. The protein synthesizer that had suffered from performance anxiety now cheerfully produced any food they requested. How did you know what to change? Asked the silver-marked engineer. His tone was no longer dismissive. It was curious and respectful. I listened to the machines, Jake said. Your bioneural networks are like people. They get stressed when they have too many responsibilities. They get scared when they don't have backup plans. I just gave them what they needed to feel safe and do their jobs well. In the artificial gravity section, Jake demonstrated his zone-based system. Velthari had to admit that his simple approach was more reliable than their complex tracking. System. People could move around the station without worrying about sudden gravity changes. It's not elegant, protested one of the scientists. It's so ... mechanical. Elegance. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work, Jake replied. I kept your elegant systems as options for when you want something special. But day-to-day operations use simple, reliable methods. You can have both beauty and function. By the end of the tour, the Velthari team was quiet and thoughtful. They had expected to find a dead human in a derelict station. Instead, they had found a living human and a station that worked better than anything they had ever built. Commander Zethara stood in the central control room, looking at the displays that showed every system running in perfect harmony. Green lights everywhere. No failures, no warnings, no problems. "This changes everything," she said softly. "What do you mean?" Jake asked. She turned to look at him with her large, dark eyes. "We came here to salvage whatever we could from a failed experiment. Instead, we have found a new way of building things, a way that combines our knowledge with yours." The commander paused, making a decision that would affect both their species. "Engineer Mitchell, how would you like to become the director of the first joint human-Velthari research facility?" Jake looked around at the station he had rebuilt with his own hands, at the systems that combined the best of both worlds, the future he had created from what others had seen as failure. "I thought you'd never ask," he said with a grin. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of his station, watching the busy traffic outside. 3 human ships and 2 Velthari vessels were docked at the expanded docking bays. Scientists and engineers from both species worked together. In the corridors below him, the Kethfer Research Station had become the most important facility in this part of the galaxy. Jake smiled as he watched Dr. Susan Clark, a human biologist, explaining something to Velthari scientist Kethmer using hand gestures and simple drawings. They were working on a new type of bioneural network that combined human durability with Velthari intelligence. It was one of dozens of joint projects happening on the station. Commander Zethara joined him on the observation deck. She had been promoted to Director of Interspecies Cooperation and spent most of her time on Jake's station now, the Council. "Meeting went well," she told him. "They approved funding for 12 more hybrid research stations. All of them will be built using your design principles." Jake nodded. It felt strange to think that his desperate repairs had become the foundation for a new way of building space stations. Engineers throughout human and Velthari space were studying his work, trying to understand how he had made alien technology so much more reliable. "Any problems with the Council?" Jake asked. "Some of the older members still think your methods are too crude," Zethara admitted. "They cannot understand how mechanical switches and metal pipes can improve our sophisticated bioneural systems." "Results speak louder than opinions," Jake said. "Station 7 reported 98% uptime last month. That's better than any pure Velthari facility has ever achieved." Station 7 was the newest hybrid facility, built entirely from scratch using Jake's combined approach. Human engineers and Velthari scientists had worked together from the beginning, creating something that neither species could have built alone. Jake's personal tablet beeped with an incoming message. It was from Captain Rogers aboard the human ship New Frontier. The message was short but exciting. "Jake, we need your help. Found something amazing, but it's too dangerous for normal equipment. Can your hybrid systems handle extreme conditions?" Jake showed the message to Zethara. Her large eyes lit up with interest. "What do you think they found?" she asked. "Only one way to find out," Jake replied. "But if they need hybrid systems, it must be something that requires both reliability and sophistication." Jake had learned that his hybrid approach was perfect for dangerous or difficult situations. Pure Velthari systems were too delicate for harsh environments. Pure human systems were too crude for complex tasks. But hybrid systems could handle both challenges and complexity. Over the past months, Jake's hybrid technology had been used in many difficult situations. Mining operations in radioactive asteroid fields, research stations near unstable stars, exploration ships venturing into unknown regions of space. Every time, the combination of human reliability and Velthari intelligence had succeeded where single-species technology had failed. Jake walked down to the main engineering section where his original workshop had been expanded into a full laboratory. Human and Velthari engineers worked side by side at workbenches covered with both species' tools. The sight still made him proud. He found Lisa Park, his old teammate who had returned to work on the station 3 months ago. She was training a young Velthari engineer named Sektar on human mechanical systems. "Lisa, pack your tools," Jake called out. "We have a new mission." Lisa looked up from the circuit board she was assembling. "Another impossible situation that needs the magic touch." "Looks like it," Jake said with a grin. "Captain Rogers found something that scares normal equipment. Those are the best kind of problems, Lisa replied. She had adapted well to Jake's philosophy of turning impossible challenges into opportunities for innovation. Young Sektar looked nervous. Is it true that human engineers enjoy dangerous assignments? We don't enjoy the danger, Jake explained. We enjoy solving problems that others think cannot be solved. Danger is just part of the job. Jake spent the next hour selecting a team for the mission. He chose 3 humans and 3 Valthari, each with different specialties. The team had worked together before and understood how to combine their different approaches effectively. As they prepared to leave, Jake took one last walk through his station. The corridors hummed with activity. Scientists conducted experiments that neither species could have imagined alone. Engineers built machines that combined the best ideas from both cultures. Students from many worlds came here to learn the new hybrid technology. In the central control room, Jake paused at the display that showed system status for the entire station. All green lights, as always. No failures, no emergencies. Just steady, reliable operation that people could count on. But Jake knew the real success was not the technology. It was the cooperation. Humans and Valthari had learned to work together. Combining their different strengths instead of competing with each other, the hybrid technology was just the beginning. The real hybrid was the culture they were building together. Jake's tablet chimed with another message. This one was from Admiral Martinez, commander of the human fleet. Jake, congratulations on another successful quarter. Your station's research has increased human technology efficiency by 34% across all sectors. The president wants to give you a medal. Jake deleted the message without replying. Did not need medals or recognition. He had something better. He had the satisfaction of seeing impossible problems become routine solutions. He had the joy of watching 2 species learn from each other. He had the knowledge that his work was making life better for millions of people across the galaxy. Most importantly, he had proven that being abandoned and left to die could become the starting point for something amazing. Sometimes the best innovations came from the worst situations. Sometimes being forced to work alone taught you how to work with others. Sometimes the people who wrote you off were the ones who needed your help the most. Jake Mitchell had been left to die on a broken alien station. Instead, he had built a future where humans and aliens could accomplish anything together, as his ship prepared to launch toward their next impossible mission. Jake looked back at the station one more time. It was no longer the place where a human had been abandoned. It was the place where 2 species had learned to become something greater than either could be alone. The future was hybrid, and Jake could not wait to see what they would build next.